It is the evening of November 9th, 1989. The air in Berlin is biting cold. At the Bornholmer border crossing, a crowd is gathering. First, it's dozens, then hundreds. Soon, it is tens of thousands. They are staring down armed guards who've spent the last 28 years with one strict order: shoot anyone who tries to cross. For 3 decades, the Berlin Wall has stood as the ultimate symbol of a fractured world. It is 96 miles of concrete, barbed wire, landmines, and sniper towers. It has torn families apart. It has claimed hundreds of lives. It is the Iron Curtain made manifest. But tonight, something is different. A rumor is spreading like wildfire across East Berlin. A rumor that the border is open. Inside the guard station, Commander Harald Jaeger is sweating. His men are vastly outnumbered. He calls the superiors, begging for orders. Do we shoot? Do we hold the line? The phone lines are chaotic. No one in the East German government seems to know what is happening. Because the truth is, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the event that would end the Cold War and reunite a nation, wasn't a carefully planned military operation. It wasn't the result of a treaty. It was an accident, a spectacular, world-altering, bureaucratic blunder. This is the story of how the world was ripped in half, the story of those who risked everything to escape, and the story of the exact moment a slip of the tongue brought the Soviet Empire crashing down. To understand the miracle of 1989, we have to rewind to the ashes of 1945. World War II is over. Nazi Germany is defeated, and the Allied victors, the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, carve up the country into 4 occupation zones. The capital, Berlin, sits deep inside the Soviet zone. But because of its importance, the city itself is also sliced into 4 sectors. Quickly, the alliance crumbles. The Cold War begins. West Germany becomes a thriving capitalist democracy supported by the West. East Germany, the GDR, becomes a strict communist satellite state under the iron grip of Moscow. And right in the middle of this stands Berlin. By the late 1950s, East Germany has a massive problem. It's bleeding its most valuable resource, its people. Every day, doctors, engineers, and young workers take the subway from East Berlin to West Berlin, and they never come back. Between 1949 and 1961, nearly 2.5 million East Germans flee to the West. It is a brain drain that threatens to completely collapse the East German economy. The Soviet premier, Nikita Khrushchev, calls West Berlin a bone in the throat of the Soviet Union. They need a solution, and they need it to be a surprise. In the dead of night on August 13, 1961, the residents of Berlin are awakened by the sound of heavy machinery and military boots. Operation Rose has begun. Under the cover of darkness, East German soldiers tear up streets, erect barricades, and unroll miles of barbed wire straight through the heart of the city. When the sun rises, Berliners step outside to find their world cut in half. People living on one side of a street suddenly cannot cross to the other. Families are separated. Workers are cut off from their jobs. At first, it's just wire and cinder blocks, but over the years, the government will upgrade it. It will become a monstrous, impenetrable fortress. The Berlin Wall has been born. Most people think of the Berlin Wall as a single concrete structure. It wasn't. It was actually 2 walls. Between them lay a nightmare known as the Death Strip. This gap, up to 150 yards wide in some places, was covered in raked sand to show footprints. It was laced with tripwires, anti-vehicle trenches, beds of nails, hundreds of attack dogs on long leashes, and 302 watchtowers manned by snipers. Their orders were clear: Schießbefehl, order to fire, shoot to kill. But the physical wall was only half the trap. The other half was in the mind. East Germany was monitored by the Stasi, one of the most ruthless and effective secret police forces in human history. They had nearly 100,000 employees and hundreds of thousands of civilian informants. Your neighbor, your coworker, even your spouse could be reporting your conversations to the state. Paranoia was a way of life. And yet, the human desire for freedom is a stubborn thing. Over the 28 years the wall stood, around 5,000 people managed to escape. Their methods were the stuff of Hollywood movies. People dug massive tunnels underneath the death strip. They built secret compartments inside cars. They swam across freezing canals under the cover of darkness. Two families even secretly built a massive hot air balloon and flew it over the wall at night. But not everyone was so lucky. At least 140 people died trying to cross. One of the most famous and tragic was 18-year-old Peter Fechter. In 1962, Peter was shot in the pelvis while trying to climb the final wall. He fell back into the death strip. For nearly an hour, he bled to death, crying out for help. The West German police couldn't intervene without risking a shootout. The East German guards just watched him die. His death outraged the world, but it also proved exactly what the East German regime wanted to prove. Do not try to leave. There is no way out.
For decades, the wall felt permanent, a grim fact of life. But as the 1980s rolled in, the geopolitical tectonic plates began to shift. In the Soviet Union, the economy was stagnating. A new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, took power. He realized the USSR could no longer afford the arms race or its suffocating control over Eastern Europe. He introduced glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. The West sensed the weakness. In 1987, US President Ronald Reagan stood in West Berlin right in front of the Brandenburg Gate and delivered a direct challenge. By 1989, the Iron Curtain was fraying. In Poland, the Solidarity movement forced democratic elections. But the fatal blow to East Germany came from a surprising place: Hungary. In the summer of '89, Hungary decided to open its border with Austria. Suddenly, there was a back door. East Germans realized that if they could get to Hungary, they could cross into Austria and from there travel to West Germany. Tens of thousands of East Germans packed up their tiny Trabant cars, pretending to go on vacation to Hungary, and simply never came back. The East German government panicked and banned travel to Hungary, but the genie was out of the bottle. The people who stayed behind had lost their fear. Across East Germany, massive peaceful protests erupted. Every Monday in the city of Leipzig, crowds grew. First a few thousand, then 10,000, then 100,000. They marched through the streets chanting, "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people." The East German dictator, Erich Honecker, wanted to send in the tanks. He wanted a bloody crackdown like China had just done in Tiananmen Square. But Gorbachev refused to send Soviet troops to back him up. Honecker was forced to resign. The regime was collapsing. They needed to do something to release the pressure, or the entire country was going to explode into civil war. This brings us to November 9th, 1989. The East German Politburo decides on a compromise. They draft a new travel regulation. It states that East Germans can apply for visas to visit the West, but they still have to go through a bureaucratic process. The idea is to make it look like they are opening up while still keeping control. The man tasked with announcing this is Günter Schabowski, the party spokesman. But there's a catch. Schabowski missed the meeting where this was discussed. He simply handed a piece of paper on his way to a live internationally televised press conference. He hasn't even read it yet. At 6:53 p.m., near the end of a boring hour-long press conference, a journalist asked Schabowski about the new travel rules. Schabowski pulls the paper from his pocket, puts on his glasses, and begins to read aloud. He reads that private trips abroad can now be applied for without prerequisites. The room goes dead silent. The journalists are stunned. Is he saying the borders are open? An Italian journalist speaks up and asks, when does that come into effect? Schabowski scrambles. He looks at his notes. He doesn't see a date, so he improvises. He says, as far as I know, it takes effect immediately, without delay. Immediately, without delay. Those 4 words broadcast live into the living rooms of millions of East Berliners. They don't hear, go apply for a visa tomorrow. They hear, the wall is open, right now. Within minutes, people leave their dinners on the table. They grab their coats. They flood into the streets, walking toward the border crossings. Which brings us back to Commander Harold Jaeger at the Bornholmer Strasse crossing. It's 9 p.m. The crowd outside his window has grown to biblical proportions. They are chanting, open the gate, open the gate. Jaeger is desperate. He calls Stasi headquarters, he calls the military, but the government is paralyzed. No one wants to take responsibility. No one will give him an order. By 11:30 p.m., the pressure is unbearable. Jaeger looks at the thousands of faces pressing against the gate, women, children, old men. He knows that if his guards open fire, it will be a bloodbath, a massacre. He has to make a choice. Follow the doctrine he has sworn his life to, or follow his humanity. Jaeger turns to his men. Open the barriers.
The gates swing open. The Iron Curtain fractures. Tens of thousands of East Germans pour into West Berlin. On the other side, West Berliners are waiting for them with champagne, flowers, and open arms. Strangers embrace, weeping openly in the streets. The scenes that night are pure, unadulterated joy. Bars in West Berlin declare free drinks for anyone from the East. Traffic comes to a complete standstill as people dance on the hoods of cars. And then, the people turn their attention to the wall itself. Armed with hammers, chisels, and pickaxes, Berliners climb on top of the concrete monstrosity that had imprisoned them for 28 years. They don't wait for the government to tear it down. They do it themselves, piece by piece, chunk by chunk. That night, there was no East or West. There are only Germans. There are only human beings, reunited at last. The fall of the Berlin Wall triggered a domino effect. Less than a year later, in October 1990, East and West Germany were officially reunified into a single nation. And by Christmas Day 1991, the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist. The Cold War was over. All because of the unstoppable will of the people and one terribly prepared press secretary. Today, Berlin is a vibrant, unified metropolis. You can walk down streets without ever realizing that not so long ago, a heavily armed death strip divided the pavement beneath your feet. The physical wall is mostly gone, sold off in chunks to museums and tourists, but its legacy remains. It stands as a permanent reminder of the lengths to which tyrants will go to cage the human spirit. And more importantly, it proves that no wall, no matter how tall, no matter how heavily guarded, can stand forever against the sheer force of human hope.